This is steel cable. It's an industrial product that's used in a wide variety of applications. Now, as a knife maker, I've made some knives that have some pretty weird and funky things. However, I've never used something like this before. So as always, the question stands, can we make a knife out of this or not? Now our first problem is the steel cable is covered in rust. This is because it sat outside for an extended period of time at the client's homestead. I know at some point I'm gonna have to forge weld these together, so I need to make sure that I have it all clear of rust before we do anything like that. Now that we cut this to length, this actually came as a little bit of a surprise to me in the fact that I thought these cables were joined in the center, not at the end. So I was a little bit thrown off guard when it fell into pieces like this. Now we just let it sit for a little bit and we'll check on it. If you couldn't tell already, we're basically using vinegar to dissolve a rust off the surface of the metal. This prepares it so that I can actually do something with it, rather than just have it be a rusty hunk of junk. Oh yeah, that looks it's looking a little lovely. All right, so it has been a few days and now the thing has a disgusting smell. It looks gross. So essentially what we're gonna do is take a wire steel brush and just try to get off that the vinegar did not dissolve. So let's do that. All right, so the next step is we need to weld these together. Now, there's a little bit of an issue in the fact that I don't have my hydraulic forging press in this workshop. It's actually a few minutes away at my parents' place. Now that being said, it's just a short drive, so we need to go there so we can forge weld these together. So the first thing we need to do is we need to MIG weld these together because right now they're all these separate pieces. Essentially we're going to tack weld them on either end, that way it holds it together and then we can twist a little bit tighter, as that's the first step to forge welding this cable, is we need to get a little bit tighter of a twist. So let's do that. That's not good. Oh, I spilled steak on it. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is heat it up, and we're first going to put it in the press and use a twisting tool in order to, give it a little bit more of a twist. I run into a little bit of an issue here in the fact that this is round, and that's not very easy to twist. So I'm going to start out by squaring off one end on the press before flipping it around and locking it in the jaws. Now the twisting tool I mentioned is basically just an adjustable wrench that we welded on an extra bar on the other side. This allows me to put more even torque while twisting, And if you're going to do this on your own, make sure you make one of these tools, because if you try to do it with just a regular old crescent wrench, oh my goodness, it is like 10 times harder to get anything even. All right, I'm going to shut up now and just let you enjoy this montage of twisting. Been twisted really well. What I'm going to be doing is now squishing it flat. This is to prepare it for the next step. So we got to make sure everything gets nice and forge welded. So let's do that. Alright, so this is now officially cooled down. So what we're going to do is basically grind off this scale and dip it in the acid so we can see what our cable looks like. I'm pretty excited. These things look pretty homogeneous. And then, yeah, we'll go from there and see how we can make a blade out of it. Alright, so let's dip it in the acid. This is just a very strong bath of ferric chloride. And it's pretty old too, but should work. Oh dear, that's, you don't want to breathe in those vapors. Oh, holy crap! What on earth? Why is that so cool? What the heck? So now we know what our cable looks like. I'm going to take this old file that I have from a previous project, and this is usually 1095. Essentially, I'm going to stack the cable on either side of it and use our file as a piece of core steel. This will make sure that our edge is a nice solid bar of 1095. I usually do this if I'm working with an unknown material, just because I don't know what it hardens like. I don't know those properties. So I want to make sure that I have something that I do know, that way I can make a good functional knife, not just something that looks pretty. So now it comes time to make the knife out of the steel that we made. Now, one of the biggest things I'm worried about is I don't know what type of steel that cable is. I know you can etch it. I know it responds like carbon steel, it rusted. But the only problem though is that I don't know if things forge welded properly. So I'm hoping whenever I grind into this thing, it doesn't just come apart on me. But so let's go ahead and do that. We're gonna profile it first and yeah, see if we can make a pretty cool knife. Ooh! Oh, some bird pooped on my window! Now that the blade's been profiled, we can move on to doing our rough bevels. Now there's times that I'll heat treat without doing any grinding on the blade whatsoever. However, in this case, I really want to see how things held together. By grinding before hardening though, you're also saving your belts a little bit of work, as it's a lot easier to grind the soft steel than the hard steel, obviously. That being said, I'm only going to take things to about 70% their final grind before I move on to the next step in the process. Alright, so now things are prepped and ready for heat treat. So as per usual, we're going to do the normalization cycles, yada yada yada, and then we're going to go from the quench. Now this is kind of the scariest part for me because I don't really, there's some sort of imperfections that you can see on these bevels that I ground, and so I'm worried that when I quench it, I'm worried the two steels are going to pop apart. So this is kind of the moment of truth to see how things really held together. I've had in the past billets of QMI, which is where you put copper and steel together. I've had those split apart at this stage. And the reality is that whenever you quench things, if materials don't have similar working properties, a lot of times that's what leads to issues. And so I'm hoping that the cable doesn't have a dramatically different working property and quench property to the 1095 we use as the core steel. So let's go ahead and roll the dice and see what happens. So, all right. Alright, so as a knife maker, one of the biggest issues that we face is the expense of tools, machinery, material costs, all of that. And one of the things that is not a lot of fun to have to do is order new belts for a belt grinder. A belt can typically range between $5 and $10 usually, and then some can go well over $20, $30 depending on how fancy you get. Fortunately, I reached out to Benchmark Abrasives, and you can use my code ENZFORGE at checkout to get 10% off your order and help save you a couple dollars on each order. So thank you, Benchmark, and now let's go ahead and do some more work on that knife. After the blade's been tempered, I then go through and finish grind the blade. I basically bring everything down to about 95%, that way it's ready for hand polishing later. I'm also going to add in a tapered tang, which essentially acts to lighten things up as well as produce a really interesting visual aesthetic. Oh, that is wild. That's wild. Okay. The final step to this project is to put a handle on the blade. To do this, I'm first going to pick out a block of Australian ring gidgee. This is an exotic hardwood that I really like. It has a lot of really cool figure, and it's just overall a joy to work with. So we basically just need to cut 2 slices off, that way we can make our 2 scales. So let's do that using the bandsaw. Where did that go? There's probably a better tool for that, honestly. Now I want to make sure that I wipe off this excess epoxy here, as this is a spot I won't be able to touch up later once the epoxy cures. All right, so now that it's dried, what we're gonna do is basically go through and shape the handle. So that's the next step, and we'll go ahead and polish things. And my goodness, is this thing looking cool. Hey, that's pretty sharp.